Hello guys, what is going on and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, I primarily cover comics and manga. Today I'm going to be breaking down for you the structure of a Haikyuu match. So spoilers for the Haikyuu manga and anime. This video is going to specifically cover the most recent match, Karasuno versus Inarizaki. Now the reason that I picked this match is because it's rather long, especially considering like the match before it was like less than 20 chapters. It's around 45 chapters, starting from 249, but with relevant backstory starting from 247 and finishing at 291. Now, before we get into some of the minutiae of the match, I just want to say some interesting stats about the match. So firstly, there was a total of 101 backstory pages. Now, this could have been just one panel in a page that was backstory, like just a flashback panel, or it could go to a fully fledged backstory panel where all of it was backstory. And continuing with the backstory, throughout the entire match, there was only one chapter that had majority backstory pages. So there wasn't a single chapter in the entire match which was entirely backstory. Now, if you compare this to, say, like a manga like One Piece, in which there can be 10 chapters plus in a row that is only backstory, that is, like, really cool that Haikyuu are just, like, adding little bits of backstory here and there, never taking up a full chapter for just backstory. And that one chapter, which was primarily backstory pages, wasn't even a Karasuno player. It was a Nakoma player, Kenma. Now, this is an interesting one. The only chapter to completely focus 100% on an Inarizaki player was chapter 274, so right in the middle, which focused on Shinzuki. If you don't know who he is, I don't blame you, because he's a random substitute with minimal impact on the game. I don't know why he was the only one which got a complete chapter focus on him. Now, some people might be confused by this, especially if they're trying to remember the chapters that happened in the Inarizaki match, but when it came to focusing, I always picked a Karasuno player over an Inarizaki player if they were both being focused for it. So, for example, Miya Atsumu, if he was focused on like his specific like float serves and stuff like that, or his jump serves, and Nishinoya was the one having trouble with it. Like his main arc throughout this match was the fact that he couldn't do like the overhand serves. Then if there was a chapter like that, even though you could argue that it was Miyatsumi that was being focused on because he was the one serving, I think it was actually Nishinoya because he was the one having the growth moment, while Miyatsumi wasn't having any growth at all. It was just showing off how good he was. And finally, the last fact, there was only 9 chapters which I could not attribute a focus to. So there is 9 chapters which I've labeled as general, as in there's no character growth, no character moments really in the entire chapter. And another interesting thing, 4 of those came in the last 4 chapters of the entire match. So moving on, I'm going to cover and analyze each chapter to determine the structure of the match, which should hopefully indicate why certain points were good, great, and not so great. Also, in doing this video, I have found that Haikyuu is more shonen-like formulaic than I thought. It's understandable because it currently airs in Shonen Jump, but with a lot of people, including myself, praising it for its uniqueness, especially when it comes to comparing it to other sports manga such as like Karuko and stuff like that. Actually seeing what is hidden behind the curtains, like the art and the humor and the great character moments, it was really enlightening for me. Now, I've got a treat for you. Firstly, let's break it down with some charts, starting off with the basic amount of chapters focused on the individual characters. Now, data can be misleading, and it is definitely misleading in this case. Just looking at the charts, you would expect Hinata to be the primary focus of the match. I mean, you would expect that anyway, considering he's the main character. And if you don't expect that, at least expect him and Kageyama to be the primary focus, considering those two together have the most chapters between them. and you would expect them to be the primary focus of the match. But if we actually take a look at where the bulk of their chapters took place, you will find out that a lot of them are at the end of the match, which makes a lot of sense from a story standpoint. They're the main characters, and with the match coming to a close, you want them to be the ones at the forefront. You want them to be the ones at the forefront of people's minds, and be like, yes, these are the characters that are going to win the match for us. However, when it came to the character which was most focused, who I would say that this match was written for, who had the most impact, and indeed who had the most growth in terms of being a player and a character, it went down to Tanaka. If we have a look at the placement of his chapters, you will see that they are all together in a sort of mini arc, right in the middle of the match, with plenty of hints before the arc that it was coming up. Like, we got like a bunch of little hints that, oh, something's going to happen, otherwise Tanaka's going to be left behind here. He needs to grow as a player and change. In these 4 chapters, you see him overcome great struggle, as well as a backstory chapter with some follow-up on a previous story that took place right before the beginning of the match. Tanaka is the only character from Karasuno to get a fully fledged backstory chapter, as well as follow up on a previous story thread. While reading these 4 chapters, I could also determine by which how focused they were on Tanaka compared to other chapters on other characters. For example, Tanaka in his 4 chapter arc was in 60.2% of the pages, so averaging around 10 pages per chapter. Now, if we take a look at a character with more chapters to his name, being Nishinoya, firstly, you will see that his chapters are spread throughout the match. That's completely scattered. But if you look at the percentage in which he was in each chapter, it totals up to just below 40%. Now, this is completely subjective, and I'm willing to admit that I might have a bias after finding out about this data, but I do feel like that extra 20% made such a difference to how I felt about Tanaka as a character, and also how interested I was in the chapters that he was involved in compared to the chapters that Nishinoya was involved in, and overall it's a general story. Now, sticking with the Tanaka character, it's not just the overall involvement and focus that the character was given, but also the timing in which he was given it. Right before his arc, there was 2 chapters focused on Yamaguchi. If you don't know who Yamaguchi is, he is the main pinch server for Karasuno. A character that is barely used and isn't super interesting, honestly. And straight after, we get 4 chapters focused on Nakoma, specifically Kenma, who isn't a part of Karasuno or even involved in the current match. So that obviously puts him lower on the priority scale in our minds. This means that the only main character to get any story or character arc in 10 whole chapters, which, depending on breaks and stuff, could be 3 months for people reading it in real time, was Tanaka. Finally, even though Tanaka had 4 chapters that truly focus on him, there were 2 chapters focused entirely on the crowd at the start of the game, as if they were players on the court too, and those chapters were focused on Tanaka's sister. Also, in my favourite mini-arc near the end, with Kageyama being the focus, it builds upon Tanaka's growth and chapters from earlier on in a perfectly satisfying way. Now, this is how to do an ensemble cast. For me, Tanaka was 100% the primary focus of the match, yet he was only given 4 chapters, meaning that 41 chapters, he was the primary focus in my mind. 41 chapters didn't focus on him, but the other characters instead. And he still got such growth, as other people got growth as well, but he got such massive growth. It's amazing. Now, moving on, if we head back to the beginning of the match, we can see how masterfully the viewpoint and setting was established. The first chapter in this brand new arc completely focused on the enemy team in Arizaki. This was followed up by 3 chapters with no primary focus, showing how frantic and excited the team was. In chapter 249, the match begins, and it isn't until chapter 253 that we get a Karasuno character chapter. Instead, what happens is we get 2 chapters entirely meant to paint the scene. 2 entire chapters just to show how loud the crowd is and how insane the court must have felt for people standing on it, such as Karasuno. Not only to have the enemy crowd be so loud, but also to have a home crowd at all cheering you on and playing loud music. It was seriously one of the best moments of the match for me, looking back, and it was barely at the beginning. For me now, looking at the list of chapters, it's clear why I thought which part of the match was the best part. I thought from around 257 to 270 was the best, just because of how it felt. Like, because the author, it felt like the author was in control of what was happening. The system was simple. As the match slowly progressed, each character got story and growth. It took a second for the match to come into itself, and I felt like that was great because of how out of the depth Karasuno must have felt. But once they settled down, so did the story, and that's when we really got down to what Haikyuu is about. The characters. Once chapter 271 hit, however, even though the match was progressing like any other, despite Karasuno losing the second set quite badly, we never got enough time with any of the characters to get any worthwhile story out of them. It just kept switching all the time. I want to talk specifically about chapters 276 to chapter 280. This could have been Nishinoya's moment. We did get some sprinkles of Nishinoya here and there, and he was the first character to be truly focused on in the match. Because he was the character, besides Kageyama mainly, that was the most sturdy, the most solid. Even Daichi, it felt like less solid. It was just Nishinoya, and you could always rely on him. If the ball looked like it was about to hit the floor, you could always expect a Nishinoya panel there to save him. And to make him the most sturdy pillar, even show tiniest cracks, was truly great, especially for the first chapter, being focused on the character. And like I said, it could have been Nishinoya's moment, but after 276, in 277, we instantly got a Tsukishima chapter, and then we got a premature finish to Nishinoya's story. So it was 276 being Nishinoya, 277 being Tsukishima, and then 278 being Nishinoya, and then we got 2 chapters of just in Arizaki. And we just got like some growth and some like just learning about the characters really. But we hadn't finished with Nishinoya. It felt like the author felt like he was running out of time, and he was losing interest, and like the people who was reading was losing interest in his story. But we weren't. We just wanted Nishinoya to finish his bloody story, but it felt so rushed. Now this was really the only part of the match that I had a problem with. If that Tsukishima chapter was moved to 278 instead of 277, or even if Nishinoya got one more chapter after, his 278 chapter, I think that would have been fine. But as is, I'm really disappointed in how it turned out, honestly. Moving on to near the end of the match, after chapter 287, we moved from Haikyuu right into generic sports manga with 4 general chapters to finish it off. Which I look back on now and think, it was a good idea, honestly. Having it so all of the attention was on the match, after reading it for a year, was definitely the respect that it deserved, especially after all that had been done for the characters. Also, I will still look back at chapter 290 every so often as the hypest I have ever been reading a chapter in my entire life. I don't get super hyped reading chapters. That's why I stopped doing live reactions to manga chapters. I'm glad that I did one for that one. But yeah, like that was definitely the hypest I ever got for a chapter, and it was always be stuck in my head. Just seeing Tsukishima die for the ball, Tsukishima of all people, it was the best moment in Haikyuu by far. Anyway, having said that, I feel like I have said all that I have wanted to say about this match, and hopefully I have helped you guys understand a little bit more about what goes into a Haikyuu match, the structure, how each character is focused on, and stuff like that. If you want more breakdowns on Haikyuu, any other manga, or comic for that matter, then make sure to leave a comment down below giving me suggestions. Anyway, I would just like to say quickly that the top 2 links in the description, patreon.com/NowCrabtree is my author Patreon. I do write novels. I'm currently writing a novel called Project Old World. If you want to go support me on there, then make sure to do so. You get to be able to read the first chapter for free, and if you support me, you can read any subsequent chapters that I finish every single month. And also, I am an affiliate for Creative Attribute, which is a website that creates free comics for you to read. If you choose to subscribe on there to get added benefits, you can use my code at checkout, NOSDA, and that will help support the channel. Anyway, I think that is it for now, guys. So I've rambled on for way too long, and I'm now going to have to sit through and edit this. I hate editing me. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and all the stuff I've been done. Hopefully, I shall see you next one. Goodbye.